Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. And we're looking at the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15. We've been involved in a study of the resurrection and the new creation. As I pointed out repeatedly, no one denies that the resurrection brings in the new creation. Well, we've looked at Isaiah 51, we've looked at Isaiah 64, we've looked at Isaiah 65 and 66. We have shown that in these Old Testament predictions of the new creation, which serve as the source for the New Testament predictions of the new creation, every single one of these Old Testament prophecies places the coming of the new creation at the destruction of Old Covenant Jerusalem and Israel. Now, folks, if that's the source of the New Testament doctrine of the new creation, then upon what hermeneutic, upon what basis, what is the authority for saying, well, yeah, the Old Testament prophecies of the new heaven and the new earth that the New Testament writers are quoting, those prophecies are about the end of Israel in AD 70, but the New Testament writers are putting at the end of the Christian age, which, as we have shown, the Christian age has no end. Well, we've come down to an examination of this doctrine of the new creation, and thus the resurrection, in the book of Revelation. Revelation chapter 20 tells us what? The resurrection. Revelation chapter 20, verse 10 and 11. All of the dead, small and great, the sea gave up the dead that were in it. So here's the resurrection. And what happens at the resurrection? John said, heaven and earth fled away, for there was no place found for them. What comes next? I saw a new heaven and a new earth. So this narrative, this timeline, is resurrection at the passing of the old creation and the coming of the new creation. In yesterday's video, I shared with you that the passing of the old creation, which leads inexorably and immediately to the new creation, is posited at the time of the destruction of Babylon, the old city of Jerusalem. Of Jerusalem. Now, I want you to notice the following. This is incredible. Revelation chapter 20, heaven and earth fled away, new creation. Revelation chapter 16, judgment of Babylon, the islands fled away, the mountains were shaken. The concept of mountains being shaken is the removal of earth. Now watch, Revelation chapter 6. In Revelation 6, 9 to 11, John said, under the fifth seal, I saw the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried out, how long, O Lord, holy and true, do you not avenge us on those who dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto them, and they were told to rest for a little while, until their fellow brethren, who should be slain as they were, should be completed, should be filled up, should be perfected. And then, what do we find? Verse 12 and following, the answer to their prayer. I looked when he opened the sixth seal, behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. The stars of heaven fell to the earth as fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. Then the sky receded as a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and every island was moved out of its place. You see, here's the destruction of heaven and earth, with the islands disappearing, the mountains being moved of chapter 16. The kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders, the mighty men, every slave and every free man, hid themselves in the caves and the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath has come. Who is able to stand? Do you see the power of this? We have the destruction of heaven and earth, the stars of the heavens, the constellations, the sun being darkened, the moon being turned to blood. Destruction of heaven and earth at the day of the Lord. Well, guess what? In chapter 16 through 19, it's the judgment of Babylon at the great day of the Lord's wrath. When does this take place in chapter 6? The great day of the Lord's wrath. Oh, by the way, in Revelation chapter 11, 15 and following, the great day of the Lord's wrath occurs when? The time of the resurrection. When does the resurrection take place? At the end of the millennium. You see, all of these tenets, every single tenet is tied together inseparably. But what I want you to see here, okay, is the perfect unity between Revelation 20, the passing of heaven and earth, Revelation 16, the passing of heaven and earth, Revelation chapter 6, the great day of the Lord at the passing of heaven and earth. Now, what's so significant about Revelation 6? Well, I tell you, it's incredible. In Revelation chapter 6, pardon me, notice verse 15. The kings of the earth, the great men, the rich men, the commanders and the mighty men, every slave and every free man, hid themselves in the caves and in the rocks of the mountains. Now, wait a minute. If this is an earth-burning, time-ending event, how would anybody have the time to run to the hills and hide in the caves? Doesn't work, does it? Because after all, it's supposed to be over in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Secondly, boy, this is incredible. In Luke chapter 23, 28 to 31, Jesus was being led to his death, to his crucifixion. The women are following him, and they're weeping, they're mourning, they're wailing, and Jesus turns to them and says, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves. For the time is coming in which they will run to the hills. They will hide in the rocks and the caves and say, 'Fall on us and hide us.'" And he said, now if that's the Jews that are doing this to him, if they do this in a green tree, what will they do in a dry? Do you realize that both John in Revelation 6 and Jesus in Luke 23 is quoting verbatim from Isaiah chapter 2, 19 to 21. Now, Isaiah chapter 2 through 4 is a prophecy of the last days. The day of the Lord at the climax of the last days. What's fascinating about this is very, 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 very few commentators fail to see that in Luke 23, Jesus was quoting Isaiah chapter 2, 19 to 21, and applying it to the coming destruction of Jerusalem. Now, here's the point. If Jesus, quoting Isaiah and the prophecy of the last days, at the day of the Lord, when men would run to the mountains, hide in the caves, and cry out to the rocks and the caves, "Fall on us, hide us from the day of the Lord." If Jesus applied Isaiah to AD 70, then when John in Revelation chapter 6 quotes from that exact same precise verse from Isaiah, upon what basis do you and I change the application from what Jesus made? Jesus applied Isaiah 2, running to the hills, hiding in the caves, to AD 70. John quoted that very same verse. Where's the justification for changing Revelation chapter 6 to some description of the fall of Rome? about which Isaiah was not speaking a word, about which Jesus was not speaking a word. And you see, there's more on this, but I don't have time this morning. So the point I'm making is that Jesus' application of Isaiah chapter 2, 19 to 21 was AD 70. John quoted from the same identical verse. So where do we change the application? And that means that since John, like Jesus, was applying Isaiah, and by the way, the prophecy in Isaiah chapter 2 was speaking about the day of the Lord when men would run to the hills, hide in the rocks and the caves. It would be when the Lord arises to shake the earth mightily. Okay? So, here's the application once again. Destruction of heaven and earth leads to the new creation. Revelation 6 is the destruction of heaven and earth at the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 2, which Jesus himself applied to AD 70. Therefore, the destruction of heaven and earth of Revelation chapter 6 was in AD 70. That agrees perfectly with Revelation chapter 16, the destruction of the islands of the sea and the mountains, which is Revelation 6, which was in AD 70. But that means that Revelation chapter 20, the destruction of heaven and earth, unless you can prove it's a destruction of a different heaven and earth at the day of the Lord and the day of the Lord's wrath, that means the end of the millennium was in AD 70. It means the destruction of heaven and earth was in AD 70. And it means the new creation arrived in AD 70. And yes, I develop all of that in my book, Who Is This Babylon? Go to my website, DonKPreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and order the book. Be sure to mention that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook. And of course, I'll pay your shipping. Well, don't forget, you know what? Tomorrow will be our last lesson on the new creation and Revelation. We will then do a summation of our study of the book of Revelation, a study of the resurrection of 1 Corinthians 15, and we will bring this series to a close. Don't forget, if you have a suggestion for a short series, 2, 3, 4 videos, send me that suggestion as soon as possible, okay? And then, unless things change, as I've shared with you, the preponderant request, by far the majority request, for the next series is the Olivet Discourse. And I'll try not to make it 313, 14, 15 videos, all right? I'll try not to do that. But boy, what a study. All right? Thank you for joining me for this morning's Morning Musings. We'll see you on the flip side.